Well, here we are in Media Gulch in your studio, Paddy, and with an enormous amount of broadcast music to your credit. I think, though, you started as a boy who was brought up in the country.
That's right. I was very lucky, really. The war was over, and my generation has had the most wonderful time of peace and able to get on with life, unlike my parents, grandparents, and everyone before
Absolutely.
them. Sadly, now it's all looking a bit bleak again, but that was a wonderful era because the small farmers were still around, and my father was one of those, and it wasn't easy for them because it was hard to make a living on a very small piece of land, but they enjoyed doing it, and there was a whole community of these people who got on really well together and enjoyed life and brought us up and looked after us, and we had a wonderful childhood.
This was Hampshire, I think.
Yes, a place called Ropley, which is not far from Winchester.
Now, was there much music in the family?
My mother played the piano. My grandfather used to sing Danny Boy, which is the song You Mustn't Start Too High, but he didn't. He had it organised at sort of family dues. But she was good, and I owe a lot to her because she encouraged me to do what I wanted to do, which wasn't necessarily learn the piano, which I rather failed at in those early days. Music lessons were a bit different in those days, I think. But when I got to the stage of playing in a kind of rock band, when I was supposed to be doing my A-levels, she encouraged me and helped me do it because she had been kind of denied that chance when she was young because in her day, everything went to the boys and they had quite a big family. Her family was quite I think there were 7 of them, but the priority was to get the boys trained up for something, and the girls were slightly left out, which she indeed was. But so she wanted to encourage the music, and that was great, really. And I started on the piano and rather failed. Miss Cobb wasn't the ideal teacher, I think, for my particular thing, which was really playing by ear. And later on, I bought a guitar in a second-hand shop, and everything, went from there. And we, people at school had guitars, and we started a band, and we used to go around the village halls playing, and it was great fun.
And were you popular? I mean, boys' bands are now very popular. But,
well, I mean, in a very small way. But yes, people went out on a Saturday night and had a great time and enjoyed those things. But it was a very small deal. I mean, I remember going and seeing proper bands like the Hollies and the Manfred Manns and all those people in the local Lido, or Lido if you'd rather, ballroom in Winchester.
Really?
And you could go and see them and pay how much it was, I don't know, £0.50 or something, and get inspired by these people who were pros. But we stuck to the village halls, and my fellow band people were keen on going to university, which I never was, really.
You were doing A-levels, though.
I was doing A-levels, yeah.
What A-levels did you do?
I did maths, physics and chemistry. They wanted people to build bombs in those days, so everybody was steered in that direction if possible. I really shouldn't have done that, but I didn't. In fact, in the end, I failed most of that stuff. And the BBC was absolutely wonderful because they recognised that being interested, having a real interest in things that were to do with the job you were going for, was as important as academic qualifications.
Had you been recording and editing things? Was that?
Yes.
Were those things around in those days?
There were. I had a very funny tape machine called a Gram Deck, which fitted on top of a record player and enabled you to make rather primitive tape recordings. And one of the other chaps in the band had a more kind of conventional tape recorder, and we used to record a part and then play it back and join in with it and make recordings that way.
Multi-tracking already.
Multi-tracking, but, fairly primitive, I have to say.
Yeah. Okay, so you didn't do very well with the A levels.
No, I didn't. I did get one.
Oh, good. Which one was that?
That was physics.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so I did all right with that. But I remember going to the interview at Cavendish Square, and there was an impressive array of people behind the desk, and I was sitting in my brand new suit, which my mother had marched me out to buy, sitting there, and the first chap up was the personnel, I think, what do they call them now?
Oh, yes. Well,
It was
human relations officer.
Anyway, he was personnel department in those days,
Yes.
and he immediately tried to put me at my ease by saying, "Oh, see, you've got ice skating down on your list of hobbies." And I had only put ice skating down because I had been once the previous week, fallen over, because I didn't really have very much in the way of sports and games.
But an essential qualification for becoming a studio manager.
Studio manager, you needed ice skating.
Absolutely. The job was advertised as what?
It was a technical operator,
Right.
radio. So that meant you might go to Bush House or you might go to Broadcasting House.
And what year was this?
This was 1966.
Right.
Actually, the interview was the previous year, but that's when I joined, yeah.
Okay. So you saw an advertisement, you applied, you got in, obviously with great charm,
Well,
and having ice skating as one of your qualifications.
well, one of the things that happened at the interview was that the next question was a quadratic equation, which I kind of completely froze on. And then one of the other engineers handed me something, and it was a valve, which were common in those days, and said, "Now, what do you think that is?" And I looked at it, and I said, "Well, I think it's an ECC 83. But it might be an ECC 82." And they all relaxed and laughed and thought, yes, this chap has done a few bits and pieces in the kind of radio tinkering world.
Yes.
And
Was that the case, actually?
yes.
It was. You had tinkered.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that meant more really than the quadratic equation and the ice skating.
Yes. Right. Okay, so day one, can you remember?
Yes.
What did you do?
3rd of January 1966. Arrived on the train at Evesham, which is in Worcestershire, and it's BBC Training Centre, ETD, Engineering Training Department.
Oh, the old training
And
place, yeah.
people there were partly straight in from
Yeah.
the street, and some of them had been on station at Bush House or BH, working as technical operators or assisting. And I got off the train way beyond the end of the platform and scrambled along the track, and there was a green BBC bus waiting to take us to Wood Norton Hall from Evesham Station, and met friends I still have today there. And on the first day we had sort of lots of induction courses and, you know, things of bureaucratic details and safety things and all of that sort of thing. But eventually it was a very good training.
Wood Norton, of course, was an old country house, really, wasn't it? Just as Kingswood Warren was.
I think it would nowadays be listed, but the BBC had taken it over very hurriedly in wartime as a sort of substitute in case BH got bombed. They just quickly bored holes through these wonderful kind of ceilings and walls and all the plasterwork, and there were just cables everywhere. It was like a James Bond film, really, with all sorts of equipment lying around everywhere, and it was just a magical sort of place for somebody like me, you know, who was interested in all that.
Because it was one of these centres of regional government, wasn't it? I don't know whether it was at that time.
It may have been. I
all
don't
these
know.
Underground cavernous spaces, which presumably were designed to be studios in time of war.
There was supposed to be, yes, a whole sort of network of stuff under the hill where all that was going to go on if the worst happened.
Yeah. Okay,
we had
yeah.
to sign the Official Secrets Act.
Oh, did you?
I remember, and that was very exciting because we thought, completely wrongly, that we might be in for some secrets, but no, there were none really.
What's an extraordinary thing? I didn't realise you had to do that.
In those days, yes.
To be a tape operator or
Yeah.
microphone positioner.
Well, I suppose you might have been positioning a microphone in front of somebody very important.
That's true.
Who might have
It's like
said,
General de Gaulle or
yes,
something.
or, yes, or somebody.
This was after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went through the Evesham training, as so many people did, and then what about your first proper day of work? Did they then say, "Oh, forget all that.
No.
It's now a matter of learning the practicalities"? You know?
Well, they said it in a sort of, I could translate it into a different phrase, which was, "Go and get the teas."
Yes.
And this was Bush House control room.
So you started in Bush House. Yes.
Yes.
And what were you? Okay, apart from getting the teas, what were you asked to do?
It was a mixture of operating control positions and looking at levels and establishing contact between, let's say, some Milan, let's say, and with a correspondent, getting it all set up so that then you handed it onto a conventional studio. It was called a C&M position, control and monitoring.
Right.
So you set it all up like a sort of switchboard, really, and then handed it over, and the studio people then dealt with it from
Right.
then on.
So,
did the
you weren't a
recording.
studio manager
No.
at this point, but studio managers then came in and presumably did the mixing and all that business.
That's when there was a sort of time when we were all amalgamated together, and so I went over at that time. And of course we were already doing tape editing, which was marvellous. And Bush House, whatever, I was not interested in current affairs, which meant Bush House wasn't really for me. But one of the things it did teach very well was develop your ear for tape editing, because you had to edit Chinese, all different sort of languages which were completely, unused to, and it developed your ear for tape editing, certainly.
Right. So you were working with a whole range of different languages.
Yes, so I think were there 42 or something. I seem to remember on the brass. There was a brass plate outside the entrance which said.
Yes.
How
Well, it
many
was
there
very
were.
important at that stage. This was mid-60s.
Yes.
So were there any dramatic events at that time?
Well, there was the 6 Days War.
Oh, yes.
And that was one of the things. There was a fight in the canteen between the Israelis and the Arabs, I remember,
Really?
which sort of blew over. That's a sort of local bit of news. But no, there were things going on. I remember Aberfan. That was a terrible disaster that happened when we were there. And the main thing that interested most of the people who worked there in the production side was the political conferences in September, or was it October?
Oh, you went off to the...
We didn't go to those, but we had to sort of cut extracts out. And
Yes,
for
things
them.
would be linked in
Yes.
the studio, yeah.
So there was stuff going on, but it wasn't my favourite thing from a programme point of view. I wanted to do music and those sorts of things.
But the World Service was... it had a huge audience.
Yes, it was the only... I remember going for an interview at the beginning of the job and was told that the Russians were annoyed with us because, the broadcasters we're talking about, because we had a clever knack of self-criticism. So while the Russians were saying, well, the tractor factory, the workers are producing
targets,
more and more,
yes.
and this sort of thing. And the BBC was talking about people on strike at Dagenham.
Yes.
And so it gave an air of credibility to this sort of...
Careful, cunning political ploy, obviously.
Exactly.
Yes, quite.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So how long were you at Bush House? And then you...
About 2 years, which
Right.
seemed like forever at that age.
But you didn't get much music there.
No, not really. Although we had a band in our spare time, various people, and we used to go down to Studio N42, is it N41, which was quite big, and it was encouraged that you would go to studios at odd moments, night shift, that sort of thing, and make things and
Yes,
get
because
experience.
the drama group did the same sort of thing.
Yes, I suppose so. I didn't know that.
Yes.
But yes.
Oh, okay. So
so we did it with our guitars and things.
Yes.
And,
so you were obviously learning, in that sense, how to position microphones, how to get levels right, how to balance things, and so on.
Yes,
but you were presumably able to go into that studio and play around with the faders and what
yes,
have you.
because our job then really was being on the tape machines and the gramophone decks, the record players, and doing all that stuff, which we got quite skilled at, but we weren't doing the mixing, so it was quite nice to be able to do that.
Even so, it's a good way of getting you to get extra experience without it doing any damage.
Well, and you see, the BBC were very good about encouraging that sort of thing. It wasn't stuffy at all.
No. Did you get to Radio 2? Because that's where you felt most at home in a way.
Yes. I got there, I think Radio 1 had just started, so all that changeover from the light programme, home service, third programme, that had become Radio 1, 2, 3 and 4.
And the pirate stations were still there?
No, they had been closed down. The BBC then was starting up to provide something for the gap in the market.
Okay.
So I worked a lot on all of those things, but it was a big variety in that department, which was Group 2, I think it was, pop music and light entertainment. So you could be recording Jimmy Edwards doing a sort of or Al Reed or one of those people at the Playhouse Theatre or Jazz Club with Humphrey Lyttelton and lots of jazz musicians for a live broadcast, actually.
Yes.
1 minute, Gene Vincent, who's a rock and roll star. And the next day you'd be doing Dr. Finley's Casebook, the sort of radio version of it. So there was a huge, really, variety of work. And one of the things you had to do was spot effects, where you sort of opening doors and garden gates. And I remember there was a bicycle pump with a cork on a string, which was simulated of a cork of a champagne bottle, and all sorts of lovely bits and pieces like that.
This was after the Goon Show, of course, which was famous for its sound effects.
Yes,
but they'd all finished by that time.
They'd come to an end, and also the whole thing was grinding to a halt, really, that comedy thing, and going much more over. I mean, the modern thing now is things like the news quiz and those type of things, and stand-up, a lot of stand-up. But
not what they used to call built programmes.
Well, sitcom, was that what they called them?
Well, I don't know. Whether it was a script, really.
Yeah.
The way you used to.
No, they were definitely structured in that way. Actually, I do remember doing Ken Dodd once and nearly ran out of tape because he went on for so long. He was brilliant and had his partner. She was sitting in the front row of the stalls at the Playhouse, I think, and she was taking notes on all the gags and
which ones
worked and which ones worked after another one. It was this sort of cumulative thing going on.
Yeah.
So he was a sort of real scientist when it came to working all that out.
Yeah. Now, at some point, you got connected with this thing called the Radiophonic Workshop. When was that, and how did that happen?
I was at that light music and pop music and light entertainment department, and SM, and doing magazine programmes and those sorts of things. And by that time, was doing panel, in other words, mixing, as opposed to just doing the tapes. I'm just on the verge of all that when I was told I had to go on an advanced studio managers course, or POAs as we were called at the time. And I didn't want to go. I sort of fought against it because I thought, I know everything.
It's not going to be any different, really.
Well, I did go. I was told I had to go. And one of the things we did on that course, we went on visits to 1 or 2 places. And one of those was the Radiophonic Workshop. And I was thoroughly, impressed with it. Desmond Briscoe was the organiser at the time. And he did a talk, which he was very good at. He did a lot of that. At the end, he said, if anybody'd like to come and join us for a week, just say. And
sort of mini attachment. Yes, because they did have an attachment system.
They did.
Which was very good. But
they didn't want people they hadn't really had a look at, I think, because there were creative people there who don't react well to being sort of looked at by somebody who might be slightly hostile. You don't know. Yes. It's a delicate thing, really. It's very difficult to do sort of creative things with somebody watching you.
Yes, and I remember visiting the Radiophonic Workshop at Maida Vale, that's where it was, but it wasn't a very big unit, was it?
No, there were four rooms, something like that. Yeah. At that time.
Tell us a bit about Maida Vale, because that's sort of out of the centre of London, and was famously either a skating rink or a roller skating rink.
I think it was a roller skating rink.
Yes.
That's what it used to be.
Yes.
But the BBC got it before the war, and they got it to record music in, and there was a wonderful big music studio there, the size of symphony orchestra, and
Maida Vale
chorus,
yes,
and probably double chorus, wasn't it? I think the BBC singers used to also join in with the BBC chorus.
Well, there was Studio 1, and then Maida Vale 2 was probably about half that size.
Yes.
And then there were a lot of smaller studios which were used for, I suppose, for drama. Or
Victor Sylvester.
Ah, really?
Joe Loss.
Ah, and you So you did you work there?
Yes.
Before that,
I did. I worked before the radiophonic stage. I was working there because it was what was known as an outside studio. In other words, it wasn't broadcasting house, and most of those kind of recordings took place in either the Paris, which was an old converted cinema in Lower Regent Street, and then there was the Playhouse Theatre in Northumberland Avenue, which is now back to being a theatre. And there were quite a few of them. The Camden Theatre.
Yes. The Goon shows were done there, weren't they?
I think they were. There were various. The Grafton was another one, Grafton Street. Oh. So there were a lot of these outside studios. Okay. And Maida Vale was one of them.
So you had worked there?
Yes.
Tell us about Victor Sylvester.
Victor Sylvester was marvellous. And a kind of legend. I mean, we all grew up listening to that. And this lovely viola player called Oscar Grasso, who really made the distinctive sound of Victor Sylvester. And
it was a very silky sound.
Very smooth.
Yes.
By the time I arrived, I think it had become something that was recorded, although it was recorded at the Broadcasting House end of things. It was only broadcast on World Service. I think it had passed its sell-by date on domestic radio. And down at the Camden, there was a dance floor, a kind of polished floor, and elderly people, probably a lot younger than I am now, but used to arrive in coach loads and dance while Victor read out requests.
Wasn't the Palm Court Orchestra, was it?
No, this was just Victor Sylvester and his orchestra. But the Palm Court Orchestra was around. That I remember doing that in Aeolian Hall.
Was there a real Palm Court?
No.
Sounds like a hotel.
It did conjure up all sorts of things. Yeah. But that was Max Jaffa, I think, and Jack Byfield. Yes. They were marvellous people.
Yes.
Well, I suppose there is a saying, if you should be nice to people on the way up, because you might meet them again on the way down. Yes. And but they seemed, all of those people seemed genuinely nice people. Yeah. They weren't just being nice to you because you were somebody in the BBC who might one day be a producer. Yes. They were like that anyway, relaxed.
This is the sort of thing that would have been light programme, Saturday night or Friday night or something like that, and obviously then moved to Radio 2.
Yes.
Weren't the Beatles around about that time?
Beatles arrived before I joined the BBC, actually. I mean, I think they were in the sort of 62, 63, around that time.
Because they famously recorded there, as Bing Crosby did, I think.
Yes, they were there. And I knew some people eventually who were producers who had recorded them together with all sorts of other people like Chuck Berry, who insisted on being paid in cash. No, you have to talk to Miss Truscott about this from contracts. And no, cash. Otherwise, we don't play. So somebody rushed out to the cash office, I think, and got it. But there were lots of stories about those sort of people.
Now let's come to the Radiophonic Workshop. because obviously it's famous for its music, for incidental music or signature tunes or whatever, tailor-made for broadcasting. What was it like when you arrived? What sort of equipment did you have, and what sort of things were they doing?
Well, when I first arrived, John Baker was sort of king of the signature tunes. And the way he operated was he had 3 conventional tape machines, which he used to make up tracks on and play them in sync. So he had 3 sources, if you like, which he could add echo to or balance together to make 3 musical lines. Maybe he would add some more afterwards. But and essentially the way he did it was by cutting pieces of tape together. So, for instance, if it was the sound of a cork coming out of a bottle, he was able to use a variable speed tape machine to alter the pitch of a tape loop and put a number of pieces of, a number of notes in order onto a second tape. And then to get the tune to play in the right time, he used to measure, and he'd know the length of a crotchet or a quaver or anything else, and he was able to cut these together using sticky tape and razor blades so that it played a tune on anything you liked. I mean, some people did tunes on cash registers, for instance. Yes. So that was how it was done. And there were bits of...
so real hands-on analogue days before anything digital came and spoilt the fun.
Yes, well, that was it. That was the conventional way of doing it then. And also the more abstract things were done using tape and lots of echoes and feedbacks.
Playing things backwards.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you get involved with the famous Doctor Who signature tune?
No, that was Delia Derbyshire, who was there when I joined and left, when I was there during that time. Yeah. And she didn't write it, she arranged it and put it together. And Ron Grainer, Steptoe and Son, all those things. Yes. He was commissioned to write a theme, and he handed it over to Delia, who put it together electronically with tape loops and oscillators and things. And it's a unique piece.
It is a unique piece.
And very highly thought of still by people who are
But she was using the crudest technology. Really.
She was, yes, and very skillfully.
Yes.
No, she was a very clever lady.
Good. And what sort of... were they busy? Were they making... were there people coming along all the time saying, well, I want a signature tune for something?
Well, they were quite busy when I first went there because local radio just started and local radio had no money. So they wanted stuff for nothing. And Radiophonic Workshop was capable of doing that because of the accounting system.
Yes.
So that caused a bit of a demand. And then, of course, BBC Two had started up just then. So there were a lot more programmes which required this sort of thing.
Yes.
They were taking quite a long time to do each thing, obviously, with all this cutting tape and that sort of thing. It took far longer than the days when the synthesizers arrived and you could do things much faster.
So the synthesizers arrived when you were there?
Just about that time.
Yeah.
Primitive ones to start with, and then they gradually got more and more like the ones are today.
Yes. So your early ability to play the piano came in useful?
Well, I didn't really have that ability.
But you were composing things.
Yes. And so I sort of picked up a bit of keyboard technique, but still I'm not all that great, but I use the guitar quite a lot. And, of course, the thing about the synthesizers then was they only played one note at a time. So it was more like playing an orchestral instrument with a tune rather than having fistfuls of chords.
Lots of multi-tracking.
Lots of multi-tracking. Yeah. And there were people there who were accomplished, like Roger Limb, for instance, who was a keyboard player and very good one. So he was able to do that more conventional keyboardy stuff. But most of us, put together things from our imagination, but without having a huge technique to do it with.
I'm with you, yeah. Roger wrote lots of signature tunes for us, I think. And it was good for producers who really didn't quite know what they wanted. So you come along and talk about a series, and you'll say, well, what about this? Or I'll come back to you with something. Or maybe they'd got opening titles, and you had to set music to them.
A lot of that. I mean, graphic design department was getting, quite busy with all this stuff, and I did lots of things which were just done to the picture, and that was great fun doing that. Sometimes we probably made things fit too much. I think, Henry Mancini said once, anything fits anything. And if you think about it, I mean, if you have a piece of film and just play a piece of music against it, it always looks as though it fits.
Yes.
And so it isn't necessary to spend hours synchronising things unless there's a definite reason for a change of mood or tone, or something needs pointing up. But really ought to be, I know people are now, modern day composers are much more economical about the way they do things.
Yes, but in general, pictures came before the music, or the other way around?
When I was there, it was a time of doing it to the picture. Mm-hmm. All the Doctor Who episodes were finished and pictorially, and then we had to make the music fit that, because that was the priority in television.
Yes. So these are big programmes you worked on, and most famously, I suspect, was the Hitchhiker's Guide, wasn't it?
Yes, that was wonderful to work on.
That was terrific stuff.
I did the very first episode of that at the pub. Douglas Adams said, well, we've got to get past the kind of committee in the comedy department, the Red Nose department. And so if they like it, we might get a series out of it.
Really?
And I remember him saying the great thing about it is we've destroyed the Earth in episode 1. And so now we can go anywhere, do anything. So there's no holds barred. So he didn't see it as a great thing, which it became.
The signature tune, the actual signature tune for that, used a lot of guitar.
Well, that was the Eagles, who there was a commercial record.
Oh, was it?
Yes. The reason for that was, at the very beginning, I didn't do any music for that first episode. They had bits and pieces of records, and that theme tune Douglas had decided he wanted to use way before I kind of arrived on the scene. So, and I was just doing the kind of End of the World and things like that, and the Vogon voices and that sort of thing.
Oh, I see. So you did special effects for it.
I was, yes. But then afterwards, starting with a Christmas special, which was the beginning of the next sort of series, as it were, and they said, well, could you do the music as well? Because they were running out of things to use.
The television series as well as...
but then the television, I did all of that, yes.
Oh, right. Yes.
Which was great. That was the most fun to do.
Yes. Because I gather that Peter Jones hadn't a clue what it was about when he was doing it.
He didn't, and I'm not sure that all of the cast met each other even. I don't think Peter Jones met most of the people on it. So but he just read it out, but he did it superbly well.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, because they did a sort of late version a few years back, didn't they, with a different voice, and it just wasn't quite right.
He was very distinctive, wasn't he?
Very distinctive, yes. So, what other major series did you write music for?
Well, after I left the BBC, which was 1981, so that's quite a long time ago, I got involved with those Michael Palin documentaries, and that was much more conventional type music than not electronic.
Around the World
in 80 Days. And I also did Pole to Pole, which was the journey from the South to the North Pole. Or was it the North to the South? I can't remember. North to the South, I think it was. And that was great fun working on those with a producer called Clem Valance.
Oh, yes.
And also Roger Mills, who was a wonderful documentary director. They sort of did half each, I think. Once again, that was finished product visually. By this time, I had my own studio, and I wanted to be able to write to the picture so you could see the picture going through as you were making the music. And
so you had a Steenbeck or something?
I had a U-matic, it was in those days.
Oh, U-matic.
Yeah, which was a...
But you had to run it backwards and forwards, ideally, didn't you?
That's right, and it was a sort of multi-track machine, and the U-matic synchronised, there was a thing called Q-Lock, which was a early computer sort of synchroniser.
Yes.
And it instructed the tape machine to speed up and slow down. I remember recording a string section once, and one of the things that happened was, as it got into sync, the tape wowed horribly and made this sort of like that.
Yeah.
And the string players hated it because they couldn't get the feel of the pitch, you know. There was a fix for that eventually, which muted this effect. But it was a primitive time, really.
Yes.
But you did see the thing as you were doing it, and that was quite valuable.
So you went from cutting tape and recording things and splicing it all. Then you got the synthesizer, which obviously added all sorts of interesting new noises, sampling and so on. But then the computer proper, as it were, came in. I mean, I think it was probably the Apple Mac, wasn't it?
Apple Mac, yes. And that was way after I had left the workshop.
Oh, was it? Right.
They, just as I was leaving, that's 1981, they had the Fairlight, which was the first computer-based system.
Yes.
And they could do sampling, so they could record a voice or something like that, or a dog bark, or something, and manipulate it using a keyboard. But I didn't get hold of any of that stuff until
later. But then you were making stuff for the BBC using computers, presumably, and presumably until fairly recently. I don't know how long you went on for. You still do it?
I still do bits and pieces, but I don't do any commissions at the moment. I went on for quite a while, and then I also did library music, which gets used on things, of course.
KPM.
KPM was wonderful.
Better explain that, because...
producers of programmes often end up wanting something they've forgotten to get specially written, or something comes up where they need something extra, and the music's already been recorded. There's plenty of programmes that just work using library music, because it's high quality stuff, and you've got the choice. And a film editor very often would prefer to have a choice of things than to be sort of told what he had to put in. So and it's all there, and you can listen to it, and if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But what it is clearable for copyright.
Yes,
so a producer knows that if they do the necessary paperwork, then nobody's going to complain.
Right.
And one of the writers, Keith Mansfield, once said to me, there's things I wouldn't want to write for, like cigarettes, for instance, or weapons, things like that. He said, but I can't say that because the contract has to be, there was a thing that came in called moral rights, an interesting concept, meant that anybody who created anything, either script or music, had the right to say where it was used and how it was used. But for library music, you had to give that up because it wasn't practical to have limits on it. And he said that's just one of the things one has to.
Yes, and that's still available.
It's still going. I still get some payments every now and again for the stuff that gets used.
So is this that organisations, broadcasters would be subscribers to this thing, or do they pay as they go along?
I believe there used to be a blanket fee, I think, and they used to share that out. So they were given the information about what tracks had been used, and the company called the MCPS would dole out the ones that had been used to the relevant people.
Yes.
It's quite a complex system, I think.
No, I wondered if it was perhaps available as low quality for people to try out.
Yes.
And then if they want it, you
definitely
got it at the
yes, they
quality.
definitely do that. And they also have different rates for people who don't pay a blanket fee. So, if somebody wants to use it for a private film or something, they have rates for doing all of those things. That's the MCPS. But I'm not terribly up on all that.
Fair enough. What was the last thing you did for the BBC?
The last thing? I don't know. I can't remember, really.
You can't remember. Okay.
I did get a load of global reports, those things, and the Palin things.
You got a BAFTA, didn't you?
I didn't get a BAFTA. I was
you were nominated.
which is as
nearly-
they always say,
nearly
is
as
very
good.
nice. It's not a very nice thing, BAFTAs, to be getting. Well, BAFTA's a nice thing, but it's not a very nice thing being involved in all that.
Oh.
It's
Why?
quite a disturbing thing to be part of in a way, because they really do sort of hype it all up.
Yes.
And they don't. I heard that one way of knowing whether you've got it or not on the night is to look for the follow spot operator who is lining up on the winner.
Yes, yes, yes.
He's not lining up on the ones who are
right.
second and
Yes,
third.
yes.
No, it was wonderful. And I tell you what, it was wonderful. My late wife came along and she loved it.
Oh, that's nice.
Roger's still around.
Yeah.
And he plays in the Radiophonic Workshop band, which is the latest kind of laughable thing that's going on.
Hilarious.
And
In what way would a Radiophonic Workshop band be different from Radiophonic Workshop music?
well, it was well known. It was somebody said the band that never was, because we didn't meet up or play with each other at all as
The
musically.
band at the end of the universe.
It was, yes. And they, somebody said, could you do something at the Roundhouse based on the Radiophonic Workshop stuff? And we did, and it went down quite well. So ever since then, we've done festivals and even Glastonbury, not on the main stage, I hasten to say, but things like that, which has been enormous fun.
Yes, and there was a prom recently, wasn't there? A Radiophonic
That was-
Workshop.
Well, that's more than 10 years ago,
Is it really
when
that
you say recently.
Oh, I thought it was a
But
few years ago.
maybe
well.
there was a...
I think there was another one.
There's
just
been a
few years
Doctor Who
back.
one, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably covered it. Or are there areas of your career that you'd like to sort of insert? We can edit it in.
Nothing really. I could say that I'm writing a book called Rocking at the BBC. And the reason I call it that is because when the BBC was only 50, that's, I suppose, 50 years ago now, is it? Oh dear.
Yes,
No,
yes.
it can't be that. It must have been 75, perhaps. There was Radio 1 produced a record called Rocking at the BBC, sung by Pete Drummond, one of the DJs.
Yes.
So I thought I'd call my book Rocking at the BBC.
Fair enough.
But it is really a tribute, I think, to Auntie, and there's so many good things about it. So buy it when it comes out, if it comes out,
Available to all
if
good
it
chemists.
escapes. Yes.
Paddy, thank you very much for doing this.
Terrific pleasure.